Some of you may think that now that I'm in my last month, I'm going to just kind of take it easy and lay back, but that's not why we're set up like this today. Today's talk title is entitled 99 Years of Private Lessons, and it refers to this wonderful book, Love and Law, which actually was not written by Ernest Holmes, and the fact that it's not a book that he wrote, but it's actually transcripts of lessons that he gave in his home in 1918, 99 years ago. And so you get to be part of the private lessons. So I invite you to kind of pull yourself up and take your shoes off and relax and just imagine yourself in Ernest Holmes' home. And Marilyn Leo, who was his good friend, she has a young girl who grew up next door to Ernest Holmes, said that when you're listening to this, when you're reading this, if you kind of get the idea that perhaps he was sitting with his flannel shirt and plaid shirt, I don't have a plaid shirt unfortunately, and his loafers on, and a roaring fire going in the fireplace, you would have the correct picture of what was actually happening. If we were in Pilgrim congregation, we'd have a fire going in the fireplace, but for some reason they didn't build a fireplace into here. Maybe because our cooling bill was bigger than our heating bill, but anyways. So this morning we're going to take a look at these lessons, and I've actually never read this book until I started preparing for this talk. It's the book we're going to work with all month. And I love this book because it's not Ernest Holmes in the formal writing structure. It's Ernest Holmes talking to people, saying with just basic lessons, this is how you do this. Don't do this, do it this way. And it's very direct. So for those of you who read Ernest and the Science of Mind textbook, which was 20 years down the road before the final version of it came out, this is a much more approachable, much more direct, much more personal book. And there's a couple of them available in the bookstore if you want to grab it afterwards. So I just wanted to make mention of that. I'm really loving this book. So he gave this series of lectures in his home on Monday evenings in the fall of 1918. And his students were people who were new to this teaching. His students included people who were Hollywood actors and actresses and people who were just common folk. But they were all interested in this new thought, this idea that he was working with. And so he gave that series of lectures. And many of you, or some of you may have never heard Ernest Holmes talk. So I've actually queued up, I brought a talk that he gave, and we're going to listen to about 3 or 4 minutes of that talk. So Damien, go ahead and play that now. Just so you can kind of get a flavor. He has this thick Maine accent. You'll notice it right away.
My favorite prosperity quote.
Nope, that's
Morning. This is always to me the best part of our service because it's the time that we do something practical about what we believe. Now, just what do we believe when it comes to the thought that there is a power greater than we are that we can use? That's exactly what we believe, that there is a power greater than we are and that we can use it. Now, if we wait for the world to agree, science, philosophy, and religion, to sanction our belief because of the peculiarity of our eccentricity, which means because we are just a little bit nutty, we'll wait a long, long time. It is demonstrated, proven, provable, that there is a power greater than we are. We have immediate access to it, and the access is in our own consciousness, and the way to use it is by our own consent. Now that's proven in the life of prayer, no matter what anybody's religion was or is. And it's proven not because of what people have believed theologically, but because they have believed in something. And that something is always answered. Now we believe that this works in accord with a definite law. I happen to believe that there is a cosmic body, a universal body, invisible, but that each one of us is...
Great. So you get a flavor of Ernest. You get a little sense of the humor, our peculiar eccentricity, which is to say we're just a little bit nutty, which is why mainstream religion doesn't necessarily sanction us, as he said. But you also get the depth and the passion of how he believes in this. and that he believes in proving it. Proving it. And that's one of the things that he talks about throughout this series, and it's one of the things that I noticed consistently through his life, from this 1918 lecture when he's like 31 years old, these lessons, to in his early 70s when he's still doing his final talks, the Sermon at the Sea at Asilomar. He's saying, take this thing and prove it. It's absolutely useless. It's worthless if we don't take this stuff and apply it in our lives. So if there's anything to take from today's talk, take this teaching and apply it. He's always had this vision of a whole group of people applying this and shifting the world, shifting the consciousness, shifting the health and wholeness of large groups of people. And these are the two visions that he's had all the way from his early years to his final years. And so he believes that there's only one, as he said in that talk, and that whatever we put into it is sent back to us, and that it is mathematical in its certainty. He is famous for saying that, I notice that it is not to the sentimental ones who gush and gush that big results come. It is to those who think deeply and simply and pertinently and persistently, and then because they know in what they believe, they know they will get a perfect result. Jesus said, it is not those who say, Lord, Lord, but those who actually practice the teaching, practice the words, who bring the words into form. So Ernest is very much into apply this. And he's also big into approaching a thing calmly and with certainty. Right now we're finishing up the Prosperity Plus 2 class, and the book that we're using with that is Genevieve Barron's Your Invisible Power. And in it she talks about a time when she was getting a massive demonstration. It was basically the equivalent today of getting about $500,000 coming into her life so she could go to study with Thomas Troward, which is what she really wanted to do. And she said as it started to approach, as she started to realize it was going to happen, her biggest challenge was to keep from being overly excited about it. Because overly excited means this is so unusual. Wow, it's a miracle. Instead of saying, no, this is how the law works. This is totally practical. When I get my big results, when we continue to generate results, it's totally practical. Yesterday, Judy Preble and I were talking in the morning, and she talked about when she first entered this teaching, how at first she was kind of believing it. She worked off of, well, let's see if this thing works. And that's what Ernest Holmes always says, take it and prove it. Take it and prove it. And so she said, after a while, she said she was amazed. She says she was going, this thing works. I'm getting these demonstrations. All this stuff is happening. As I pray for it, as I apply the spiritual mind treatment, as I do my work, this stuff is happening. And so it moves from belief and hoping that it works into an absolute knowing that yes, this does work. That as we hold thought in our consciousness, it generates and manifests out here into our physical form. So we don't want to be excited, any more so than we'd be excited when we turn on the light switch and we get lights. In one way, that's a miracle, isn't it? It's really cool, right? But we don't get overly excited about it. We get grateful. We're happy. I hope we're happy, right? When we get light switches on and the light comes on. So we just have to get out of the way and let this spirit express. Mind receives the impress of our thought, like the soil receives the seed and reproduces it. Mind receives the impress of our thought, what the thought is that we plant in the soil. Just like if we go plant an apple seed in the soil, it will generate an apple tree, which generates more apple seeds, right? And so we'll continue to do that process. And so as we plant our seeds of our thoughts, both thoughts of what we want and thoughts of what we don't want, thoughts of what we love and thoughts of what we fear, all those thoughts are seeds being planted into the mind. And so it reproduces. And this is the basis of that, basics of this teaching. He goes on to say, the same mind that is in us is in the universe. The same mind, no difference. So your mind and mine and God's mind are one mind. One mind. We reflect into this universal mind what we think. Practically the whole human race is hypnotized because it thinks what somebody else told it to think. It thinks from its physical environment. It says, I see sin, sickness, death, misery, unhappiness. I see calamity, and so it is giving to the creative, receptive, impersonal mind a concept. It is giving a law. Do you know what law means? It does not care if it slays you. If people would wake up and realize that law is law and not think they can say twiddle-dee and change the law. What we put out is what comes back to us immutably. And so if we're putting in ideas that we don't want to have come back, that's what still comes back anyways. As he says, just like electricity, if we misuse electricity, it'll kill us, right? Or hurt us. It's nothing personal. It doesn't hate you. It doesn't look and say, are you a good person or a bad person? It just follows law. And so the law of the universe is the same way. What we put into that law works. He says, if you could see your thought and take a picture of it and of your conditions, you would see no difference between them. So take a breath, breathe that in for a moment. If you could see your thought and take a picture of it and of your conditions, you would see no difference. God becomes only what it can through us. So when we find ourselves in a mess, we have to accept that we created that mess, and that's the bad news. And the good news is that if we created it, we can uncreate it. We can create something new. There is that within us which can create that newness. Emanuel Swedenborg, who was a wonderful philosopher in the 1700s, said, before anything is brought back into order, this is so appropriate for this day and age, I believe. Before anything is brought back into order, it is quite normal for it to be brought first into a kind of confusion, a virtual chaos. In this way, things that fit together badly, are severed from each other, and when they have been severed, then the universe arranges them in order. Isn't that beautiful? When things fit together badly. Right now I'm in the process of beginning to move. And my house doesn't look quite as neat as it normally does because it's got boxes and it's got things kind of scattered and it's in a bit of chaos. There are things that are being severed from my life. And everything I own is going to eventually be severed from that home, that particular house, and be put into a new house. A new order is being created. And so whenever we go to clean out a closet, the first thing we usually do is make a bigger mess, right? We kind of pull everything out of the closet, throw it on the floor, and it looks worse for a while. But then we can reorder it and reorganize it. And it's the same with our lives. When we find ourselves in a mess, we remember that to let the mess flow. We had a poem last night that said, even when things are going against us, they're going for us. When things seem to be going against us, they are going for us. So we have to be willing to let the universe express its nature. It's the thy will be done, not mine be done, that Jesus talked about. We have to be willing to let the universe work through us. And so often I want to impose my own ego desires upon the universe. I want it my way. Anybody else besides me ever encounter? Yeah. Okay. And so what I've had to learn to do is say, wait, not my way. The universe's way. The universe has a bigger and better idea than I do. Always. Always. And so we hold the vision of the outcome we desire, and we let Spirit do the work. We let Spirit enact its nature. We don't hold the condition in mind that we no longer want. So we don't say, I don't want to smoke anymore, or I don't want to be broke anymore. We say, I want to have healthy, clean lungs, and I want to have a body that I love, and I want to have an abundant prosperity that allows me to express freely in the world. So we can notice what it is we don't want, but we turn it into what it is that we do want out of that, and that is what we put our focus on. So he says we must have a perfect idea of what we want. And when he says a perfect idea, sometimes you say, well, I'm not exactly sure what it looks like. And that's fine. See, when I was looking for my home up in Olympia, which I wasn't looking for my home, I kind of set a set of general parameters of a general idea of what I was looking for up to the folks up there. And then I started doing my own visualization. And I said, what does Spirit want to express through me as a home that I would love to live in? And all of a sudden this idea came to me, this visual came to me of what that looked like, and I could walk through this house and I could see that perfect idea. I could get the feel for it. And sure enough, about a week later, they sent me an email back with an address and said, what do you think about this place? And I looked at it on Google Maps. Don't we live in wonderful times? We can create a fire and go to Google and go look at a house in Olympia without ever leaving Reading, right? And so I looked at that, and it was almost the exact visual. The only difference was the garage was on this side instead of this side, which wasn't important to me. But it was almost exact replication of the visual that I had. So we put that in mind into spirit. And it came, by the way, at the exact price that I wanted to pay for it, which was below market value for that house. So when we have a perfect idea of what we want, when we get the idea as best as we know what it is now, and say, Spirit, fill in the details, that happens. We must accept the fact that we have it. So once we do this work, once we hold this picture, we also have to accept that we have it. It's not out there in the future somewhere. Okay? See, that house existed, right? The house had already existed. I didn't have to go create it. I didn't have to build it myself. We accept the fact that we already have it as such. And if we look to see where it's coming from, our doubt will undo it. If we get into the how, our own doubt will undo it. So can I look at spirit? Can I allow myself to be in spirit? Can I allow myself to see this perfect picture and then accept that it is already manifesting in my life? And that is our work. So this week, I invite you to experiment. I invite you to play. So first of all, I'd like to invite you to choose an outcome you'd like to experience. Choose an outcome you'd like to experience. It can be big, it can be small, it doesn't matter. Take this thing and play with it. Sensorize it. Mary Morrissey uses that term, sensorize it. Get into it to where you can see it and feel it, touch it, and hear it. Perhaps taste it if that's appropriate. Smell it. What does this feel like to me? What does this look like to me? What does this sound like? Get into it, get a sensory experience to the best of your ability of what it is that you want. And so like with me, with the house, I could see it, and then I could walk through it and get a sense of what it looked like and felt like. And play with that. Get a clear idea of it in your mind. And he says you cannot demonstrate one iota beyond your mental ability to conceive. You cannot demonstrate one iota beyond your ability to conceive. So how big? See, sometimes I've had to ask Spirit to stretch my ability to conceive, because I have an idea and it fits here. And so I sometimes say, and there's a talk where he says, can we imagine beyond what we can imagine? Can we stretch our imagination past where it is going now? And that is the willingness to, I'm willing to let Spirit do this or something even greater than this. I'm willing to let my imagination expand beyond just this idea. This is the best I can see, and I know Spirit sees farther, and I trust that and allow it to manifest. So that's the first thing, is to choose an outcome you'd like to experience. Second is to work on your acceptance that you already have it. And this is the place where we sometimes have challenges. Emma Curtis Hopkins, who is one of Ernest's teachers, and if you have this book in her book, Scientific Christian Mental Practice, talks in the first chapter about naming your good. What is it you want? And starts the second chapter by saying, as soon as we describe what we want, we start noticing that there is a gap between where we are, what we have now, and what we want. Okay? We notice the distance. We notice that it is not in our lives, and then we start talking about the fact that it is not in our lives. We start talking about the gap, the not havingness, instead of focusing on the havingness. And that's the chapter where she starts to get into the denials and say, no, this gap does not exist. It's not real. It's just imagined in my mind. See, everything is fully present and manifest in spirit right now. The gift is already given. And now we just get to be the place that opens up to receiving and accepting that gift. And so as we can accept it, it shows up in our lives. And that sometimes is my prayer, to accept. There's the centurion who approached Jesus who said, Lord, I believe, help me with my unbelief. Help me to heal my unbelief. And so we start to accept that as though it already exists. We recognize that we are one with the universe. You and I and the universe are one. One. No separation, no difference. There's nothing you can ever do or not do to separate yourself from the infinite presence of God. And so when we know that, Then we can focus on this thought of what we want and claim it and accept it, even as other thoughts come, even as the doubts come. He says, just don't pay attention to them. Focus on what you want and the accepting of it. And then the third phase of this, after we've accepted it, is see yourself as a person for whom this would become normal. This is me. This is who I am. See, I can't stay in a place that I'm not. If I don't view myself as a person of prosperity, prosperity might come to me and I will cast it off. This is people who win the lottery and are broke 5 years later. This is people who attract a loving relationship and have a divorce a year and a half later. Nobody I know like that. This is people who, if we don't move into it and fully say, I am this person and this is my normal, okay, then we don't become that person and it doesn't stick. So we start working on, I am the person for whom this is normal, to have this home, to have this relationship, to have this money, to have this creativity, to have this beautiful flow of the universe. This is me, this is my normal. So that's our spiritual practice I invite you to take on this week. Number one, choose the outcome you'd like to experience. Get clear on that, as clear as you know how to get, and then turn it over to Spirit to even fill in the details, okay? You don't have to figure out the how. Nowhere in here does Ernest say, in fact, he says, don't get into the how. Don't get into the how. Just get into the what. Secondly, we accept it as though we already have it. And thirdly, we see ourselves as this person for whom this is normal. Are you willing to play with that this week? Yes. Yeah, me too. Great. So I want to close with a quote out of this book. And he says, regarding this thought, regarding whatever it is we want to play with, he says, think it more and more and more. It will always be attracting. This thought will always be attracting as I think it. I should focus on it until there is such a sense of peace and calm expectance and trust that I would just feel and know it is done. I do it until it is manifested. You have got to break down every law of matter and limitation that exists within your consciousness. You have got to work, and you will get absolutely nothing until you do. And when he refers to that, you have got to break down every law of matter and limitation that exists in your consciousness. If you'll notice, the reason that I don't have what I want, the reason you don't have what you want, is because somewhere in our consciousness we have a thought. We have that hypnotism that he talked about earlier, that we don't deserve it, we can't have it, we're not the kind of person who gets it, it's not possible, etc., etc., etc. And so we have to break all of that down until it no longer exists, and only the knowing that I am God in form, I am one of the one, and that this is mine, that I claim it, I accept it, is the only thing left. And then when we get that clear and that stripped down, the universe has no choice but to manifest. Let's pray. So knowing that there is that one and only one, pure love, pure life, pure light, pure power, pure peace, pure beauty and joy, that one infinite presence is all there is. And I am one of this. Each of us is one of this. This is the truth of our beingness. None of the hypnotism that we've ever heard. This is the truth of our beingness. And we all know this. There's that essence within each of us that knows this is our truth. And so with that awareness, I relax and I speak my word into this infinite presence, this one mind, this law that returns this word from the seed into the fully blossomed plant. And that word is that each and every person here blossoms and manifests the good that they choose, the good they deserve, the good that is truly theirs, that is truly their soul's calling, their soul's longing. For it is God's desire that is expressing through each of us to be uniquely ourselves and to express fully in this world as ourselves, that we are saying yes to that idea. That all the shackles that have bound us in the past of thought, of feeling, of ideas, fall away into the no-thingness that they truly are, and the truth of who we are, the true essence of who we are, this beauty, this presence, this joy, this power, this life that we are, is what manifests and shows up in our lives clearly right here and right now. We cast off doubt. We cast off fear. We cast off any belief in separation from the one and in separation from the good that shows up as our good, and allow it to manifest in our lives. And it does so. And so in gratitude, I release this word into that which we call that law, that manifestation process, letting it do the work, letting it figure out the how. We just simply claim it, and knowing it is done, knowing it is so, right here and now. We affirm that by saying, and so it is.